Alright guys, such coming here and I hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. A huge conclusion to this CDL weekend of matches. OpTic with a big bounce back series, could qualify for the winners bracket, guaranteed going into their home major, of course, where the ring ceremony will be held. But the final series of the day, that was one of the key talking points going in. Thieves versus Toronto. How would it all transpire with all the storylines around these teams in recent days? Very much interested to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Shout out the Iceman. Plenty to get into. We're going to start here. So, the Challengers Cup was happening this weekend. Notably enough this time, Stallions Red, the new Stallions Red, obviously after the whole Lqgend stuff that happened, they placed fourth. Not a bad result on paper, right? It's fourth, but then you've got to remember that all of the teams in the Elite don't play in the Challengers Cup while they were in the Elite. So there's 12 teams in the Challengers Cup that weren't even there because they're playing in the Elite and therefore they weren't attending. And, well, it's a pretty big deal, this, because 16th, effectively, is where they might sit right now. It's not exactly ideal after the few weeks they've had. What does Stallions Red need to do next? It's a good question that people are currently contemplating. But let's talk about the CDL games, because the Ravens played G2 again, and honestly, you couldn't make some of this stuff up that's happened lately. I mean, G2, they are just the same team every year. I swear it doesn't matter what roster they have. It still feels like Minnesota Rocker, right? You can take the team out of the Rocker, but you can't take the Rocker out of the team, right? Because that brand might be gone for now. It's probably never going to be back, let's be honest, but it doesn't mean that this is a different franchise, right? So Simp, first of all, said, because we know that there were some scrims happening with Ravens with a couple of players. They trialled Exceed. They also trialled Neum. We actually saw some of their scrim bucks with Neum, and, well, what did Don say the other day? They were like 28-1 or something in that time period, but that might have just been with Exceed, because we saw some scrims. I mean, Slasher was on the account. Well, it was Slasher's account, but he wasn't playing on the account before his retirement was confirmed a few days ago. We thought it might have been Neum who was their target, but according to Sib, it weren't looking so good with Neum, actually, which will be definitely interesting when it comes to this LA Thieves conversation, you know, the Kenny situation, the Neum situation, the Huntsman situation, and all of that stuff that's transpired over these last few days. Questions on whether Ravens actually ended up making the perfectly right call, bring an Exceed in. So look, Nero, map 1, often you will see that Nero will have a good map 1. One of the reasons why Nero's a good player to sign, because look, is Nero going to be winning championships just with his play style? Probably not, but is he a very talented player who can absolutely have takeover games? Absolutely. And when he does, it's pretty difficult to stop them. So they take the map 1. It then went to a map 4, I mean, it eventually went to a map 5. But Ravens definitely looking better with Exceed in the team. It's actually pretty impressive. I know that Exceed didn't have a good map 4 here, but they're playing at a faster pace now. They're more of a threat. Again, the other day they had a pretty good result against, well, a great result against Miami. Now they're playing G2, who, look, let's be honest, G2, they looked damn good in the preseason. But since the season's actually got underway, it's been pretty ropey to say the least, with the exception of Kremp on Colossus. I mean, that is basically all that G2 have, really, is Kremp on Colossus. Mumba's had his moments in the respawns, less so in the search and destroy. Sky's Estriel, you know, they've had some glimpses. But it's Kremp on this map who is just the ultimate bailout for this team. Kremp drops 54 this map. I mean, that is... He is literally everything on Colossus. It's outrageous. From like the first week of this game, we were talking about Kremp losses, and it's still very much alive and well. I mean, the fact that he had more deaths than the rest of his team by 4 or 5, and yet still had about 25 more kills, is just obscene, right? Like, the impact he had on the map was just absurd, this map. It ties the all-time CDL record, which was set by Cap way back in Vanguard at 54. Funnily enough, Nero was actually in both of these lobbies on, of course, on the losing end of this one. But yeah, Kremp drops 54, ties the all-time CDL record, of course, smashes it out of the park this year. But it doesn't matter, because Ravens take the victory in 5. Again, another G2 Game 5 collapse. Exceed was talking a little bit about maybe Slasher, the biggest thing that older players do. They take away crazy young cracked players or whatever. You've got to own it, he says. Because look, Exceed, whatever you want to say about him, he is an experienced player at this point. You might well consider him a veteran. So this is a big turnaround for the Ravens. Again, they've had a good week of matches to play. They play a top team, could be a different story. But given that they've not had much time with Exceed, at least it looks like, you look at that roster and it's like, okay, they've got quite a lot of talent on that team theoretically. Slasher wasn't the man to unlock it. Not much surprise there. He doesn't tend to like playing with these younger guys. We've known that for a long time, and that story has not changed, of course, so far this season. He's now out of the picture. Exceed's come in, seems to have revitalized things to some degree. Maybe this is finally the stint where Exceed comes good in the CDL, who knows, and becomes a mainstay. Crump, though, says, look, our overload is abysmal, because that was really the problem, right? You have a nice start, but then you lose the overload, and it always tends to be the swing in that sense. And obviously they're losing all the game 5s anyway. But Exceed is back in business and absolutely loving life, so you can't blame it at all. G2's pre-season was also promising, and then it went also swiftly downhill. So G2 lose again. That's a 1-in-4 start for them now. Pretty rough series out of Skies and Estriel. Nero had a 1.4 overall. Of course, you know, a lot of the talking point was about crimping that map 4, but Nero definitely didn't want to go under the radar here. The Den overload was probably the most dominant affair that we saw of the day. But let's talk about the OpTic series, because this was an important bounce back for them, really. Yeah, they're playing Surge, a team they should be expected to beat, no issues. They didn't 3-0 them. They would have probably liked that. It's not the end of the world that they didn't, of course. They get to 4-1. They're comfortably in the winner's bracket for the major. That's all that really matters. Mercules, though, huge takeover game 1. I think, again, the key question for me is, what happens when Mercules has like a 0.8? Because he can't be dropping insane numbers every series. He kind of has. But the talking point for me with OpTic before the new year, before Christmas, was they look a little bit ropey, but Mercules is bailing them out time and time again. And in this map 1 today, Mercules decided, okay, I couldn't bail you out a couple of days ago, but against FaZe, but I'll do it tonight, because they're going to start off map 1, 38-18, pretty much single-handedly take over. But it wasn't just Mercules, of course, but it's like, you know, Mercules isn't always going to have a monster series. When he doesn't, I want to see kind of what that looks like, but it's just so rare that Merc has an off series that I don't even really know what the answer to that question is right now. But it was an important bounce back for Shotzzy as well, especially just because he had a rough time against FaZe. People have been questioning. It's like, oh, well, you know, Simp's looking a bit better right now on the SMG. You've got the likes of Neptune, JoeDeceives, another name with a big talking point today. So where's Shotzzy going to end up playing out? Look, I'm sure that he's going to have a very good season. It's Shotzzy after all. But it's still worthy of keeping in mind. But the search and destroy was absolutely flawless. They smoked them 6-0, not even close. But it was a little surprising then to see them go on to lose the Scar overload, right? When you win the exposure in the way that they did, when they 6-0'd the Den, you'd have expected them to go on to win the Scar pretty comfortably and close out a 3-0, but no, Surge put up a bit of a fight, which means it was always going to be a little bit touch and go, but in the end, OpTic handled business. They took care of things. Huke had a great map 4, which again, Shotzzy and Huke haven't had too many takeover games this year so far, but this was one of them, 31-17, 1.82. The nuke is officially back on the map. So these were the overall numbers. In fact, I'll just bring it up map by map here because it's kind of more interesting that way to look at how things transpired. Merc with the 2.1 game 1, so really nothing that the other guys were going to do against that. The game 2 was an absolute disaster class from Surge. Fair play them actually picking it back up. I mean, Lunarz had a real takeover. It's just a map like this that turns heads and gets people thinking about, okay, maybe this guy's got something here, because, you know, you need that as a player, especially after the difficult couple of seasons that Lunarz has had. OpTic handled business though on the game 4. They turn up to the Den, Huke, Shotzzy, Dashy, all with big takeovers. And yeah, look, what did I say? When Mercules drops a 0.8, what happens? Well, this map he dropped a 0.8 and everyone else took over. So that was the OpTic series. But the question that everyone had today was what was going to happen with Toronto Ultra versus Los Angeles Thieves? Because this on paper was a key series. We talked earlier today about QK potentially going to a top 4 team. But who is a top 4 team? Is it Thieves? Is it Toronto? Where do gentlemates FaZe OpTic sit in that equation? Well, today we got a pretty clear-cut answer. I've been pretty high on this Toronto team, somewhat less sure that Thieves' record, which was pretty decent so far, was as good as it looked, especially after the gentlemates result. And look, the key question mark again is around Kenny, right? With the Neum question rising behind the scenes, with the Lurqxx question as well in recent times. But FaZe, they answered that question pretty emphatically. Abuzah and Drazah had a great series against OpTic yesterday. Kenny kind of needed to do the same thing again. And the thing is with Ken, sometimes he'll have a stinker map in there, but his average hasn't been too bad. Today, however, was a rather familiar story, right? Because this Toronto team on paper is very good. I mean, the changes they've made, bringing in ReeaL, CleanX going to the flex, it makes a lot of sense. JoeDeceives is one of the best SMGs in the game, hands down. He's probably at least top 3 right now of subs in the game, might be better than that. ReeAL's a great counterpart. Insight looks better on this title as well. They were always going to be a threat. I mean, almost every year, Toronto put together a team which is at least a threat for a tournament, if not in a finals at some point. I'd be surprised if Toronto don't make a finals this year when we look back at it. They may win one, who knows. But Joe made a great couple of plays at the end of this map. It was a close fought affair. Again, the eyes are going to be on Kenny, as they always are. And I'm not going to sit here and defend Kenny, right? But of course, it's not just Kenny that's having a horrible time. It's not like all the other 3 guys are frying every map and he's having an awful time. aBeZy didn't have a great start on Thieves so far, let's be honest, right? I mean, both of their changes, Envoy for aBeZy, and especially Ghosty for Kenny, of course, haven't really seemed to deliver so far, right? I mean, not like on aBeZy's been bad, but game 1, 23 and 27, it's fine, but the game 2 became the talking point because they lost the game 2 pretty handily. aBeZy had a pretty horrific time in the game 2. Obviously, Zenny was also talking about aBeZy playing pretty poorly. But again, the attention is on Kenny, and for good reason at the moment. Toronto, fair play to Scrap, by the way, is pretty funny, right? I'm just Scrap trying to get the sniper bad and all this, and has been one of the players seemingly most counter to it. Hits a couple of disgusting shots here with the sniper, so, you know, kind of nice to see. I guess you live long enough to see yourself become the villain or whatever. But it goes down to the wire. aBeZy does get a second kill, but JoeDeceives makes a really nice play here. So he lays down, he recognises and probably calls out that there's a possibility they run past him, and if they do, it's unlucky, but he's probably going to shoot at least 2 of them in the back. He not just shoots 2 in the back after they kill ReeaL off the bomb, but he turns around, gets 1, gets 2, spins around, gets the 3rd onto Scrap, and then the final man alive is Kenny, now with a 1 versus 3, and JoeDeceives guns him as well, despite not even having full HP. And this basically spelt the end of the series, right? I mean, you saw this happen. I mean, we're already up 1-0. This is to close out the game. It's just over at this point. It's over, and it would have been incredibly surprising if Thieves, given that we already think they might be somewhat mentally compromised, there has been talk about that from the guys on the flank, especially maybe Kenny not performing so well, questions on whether their changes have made sense. They've also got to watch Ghosty drop a 1.3 every series on Gentlemates. Can't be easy to do that, right, when you've made the call to drop this guy, and now he's frying you and the rest of the league as well. So it must be a difficult situation for Thieves mentally right now to stay in the game, and after they lost in the way they did game 2, there was just no way that the Thieves that we think we know were going to find a way back into this series, and well, we got the answers to that very swiftly afterwards. They got 4-0'd on the Den overloads. These were the final pictures of the Thieves boys, and yeah, it's a pretty ugly state of affairs right now. Is Neum the answer? I don't know the answer to that question, but it feels like this squad of 4, if things keep going as they are, might not be especially long for this world. But the numbers, they do speak for themselves at the end of the day. Insight with a 1.3, JoeDeceives 1.25, and then it's the duo from Thieves, HyDra and Scrap, 1.11, 1.12, aBeZy with a 0.85, not great, but Kenny with a 0.66. He did have more damage than aBeZy. Despite having far fewer kills, he did have more damage. But again, I think that's kind of the point, right? Like Kenny on the first map, he's got the fewest kills on the team and the most deaths. It probably just shouldn't be happening with an AR, right? I think that's the argument here. You can talk about damage all you like, but it was a problem that Kenny had as well sometimes in control, and it seems to be continuing as well on the overload, right? I mean, he was 17 in 26 on this map again for another 0.65. It's like he's playing at a pretty fast pace for an AR to just die this many times, right? I mean, CleanX obviously is a fast AR. He used to be one of the fastest subs in the game. He's got 26 deaths. aBeZy's got 26 deaths. But so's Kenny, right? Like, why are we running around for? I think that's going to be one of the key questions. But look, Thieves, they went into Christmas, they went into the new year with a point to prove. And, well, the point that has been proven is the opposite one to the one that they wanted. So lots to talk about tomorrow and the coming days. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.